On May 28th, The Washington Post reported that former U.S. President Trump stated in a past event that if Russia were to invade Ukraine or China were to invade Taiwan, he would bomb Moscow and Beijing. This indicates that Trump has had this idea for a while and that the U.S. military has long had such plans, which is quite normal in the context of geopolitics. Although Trump's rhetoric is consistently strong, his comments about bombing Beijing have once again sparked curiosity and speculation about the U.S. military's capabilities. Can the U.S. military actually bomb Beijing? Under what circumstances would this happen? What tactics would they use in such an operation? They would likely carry out a series of carefully planned actions to maximize strike effectiveness while minimizing their own losses. This complex operation would involve tactics across multiple levels, including escort, strike, and air defense suppression. Let's consider the specific battle plan proposed by Chinese netizens for the U.S. military. First, the U.S. military might dispatch an escort formation of 20 F-35A fighter jets. Half of these F-35As would carry 6 AIM-120D air-to-air missiles in their internal bays, primarily to eliminate aerial targets. The other half would carry a mix of 8 SDB small-diameter bombs and 2 AIM-120Ds, addressing both air and ground targets. This stealth fighter formation would be responsible for covering the bombers. The main strike force would be a formation of 10 FA-18E jets. They would carry a variety of weapons, including HARM anti-radiation missiles to attack air defense radars, MALD air-launched decoys to deceive enemy air defense systems, and SDB-2 bombs for precise strikes. Each jet would also carry 2 AIM-120Ds for self-defense. This formation's targets would be key military and political facilities in and around Beijing. Additionally, the U.S. military would send out 10 EA-18G electronic warfare aircraft to form a dedicated air defense suppression formation. They would carry high and low-frequency jamming pods, HARM missiles, and AIM-120Ds. Their main mission would be to attack China's air defense radars and fighter jets, clearing obstacles for the strike formation. In the first phase of the operation, the F-35 escort formation would first eliminate Chinese Air Force patrols in the Bohai Bay and Beijing-Tianjin airspace. They would then rendezvous with the carrier-based aircraft formation, clearing air defense positions along the route to Beijing. The F-35As would fully utilize their stealth capabilities and the APG-81 radar with a detection range of 320 kilometers, adopting a dispersed formation, using complementary blind spots and sharing target information. This would enable them to launch preemptive strikes against Chinese jets without relying on early warning aircraft. After a salvo of AIM-120D missiles, several Chinese combat aircraft patrolling the outer air defense zone would be instantly destroyed. The three combined formations would then rapidly advance towards Beijing. As the escort formation nears Beijing, the FA-18E strike formation would release a large number of MALD decoys, simulating a massive non-stealth aircraft formation to draw the attention of Chinese air defense radars. The real task force would advance covertly 10 kilometers behind the decoy formation, with their radar signals masked by the electronic jamming from the EA-18Gs. When the Chinese ground radars activate and lock onto the decoy formation, they would be immediately hit by HARM missiles and SDB-2 bombs. Using this deception technique, the task force aims to break through the outer air defense network of Beijing and target central political and military objectives. Chinese Air Force interceptors drawn to the fake targets would likely be shot down by the F-35A's AIM-125D missiles without any warning. For those Chinese jets that managed to get within visual range, F-35A pilots could use advanced dogfighting maneuvers like the dojo drift to quickly turn and shoot them down. If the operation proceeds smoothly, the U.S. military could disable Beijing's surrounding air defense radars in a short time, disrupt China's satellite surveillance capabilities, destroy multiple military bases, ammunition depots, and fuel depots, and damage some iconic buildings. This could lead to a stock market crash and a sharp reduction in China's annual GDP by 40%. The Chinese military would also suffer significant casualties, especially among the troops manning defensive positions. In the final stage of the operation, the strike and electronic warfare formations would begin their return, while the F-34A escort formation would cover the retreat, guarding against Chinese counterattacks. If China dispatches Su-35 and Su-30 fighters to pursue, they might only find the non-stealth FA-18Es. At this point, The F-35As would use their capabilities and the electronic cover from the EA-18 to quietly approach the Chinese fighters. As the Chinese fighters chased the formations at high speed, their afterburners would generate strong infrared signals, making them easy targets. The pilots would lock onto these targets with their helmet-mounted displays. Each F-35A would simultaneously lock onto multiple Chinese jets. Upon the squadron leader's command, 40 AIM-9X Block II missiles would launch from the F-35As, following unpredictable trajectories toward the unsuspecting Chinese fighters. Due to the smokeless engines of the AIM-9X missiles, Chinese pilots might not realize the danger until the missiles are close. The leading Chinese jets would be the first to be hit, and any remaining jets, even if they attempt evasive maneuvers in panic, would be likely locked onto by the missiles. After a series of explosions, the surviving Chinese jets would be annihilated by the F-34A's AIM-120D missiles. Chinese commanders would be left watching helplessly as the radar blips representing their jets disappear one by one. Of course, the Chinese military is not entirely unprepared for the threat posed by US stealth aircraft. Around Beijing, there are indeed numerous advanced air defense missile systems, such as the S-300, S-400, and the domestically produced HQ-9B. However, whether these systems can effectively counter US stealth aircraft remains to be seen. In the recent Russia-Ukraine conflict, the S-400 system, dubbed the NATO killer, was repeatedly destroyed by Ukrainian HIMARS multiple rocket launchers. Air defense experts point out that while the S-400 can detect stealth aircraft, tracking and locking onto them is much more challenging, let alone shooting them down. Faced with a US aircraft attack, these air defense systems might end up watching the stealth jets fly by without being able to respond. The HQ-9, considered the Chinese version of the S-300 and S-400, also faces questions regarding performance and reliability. Although China has exported this missile system to Pakistan and Syria, it often performs poorly and fails to respond effectively during actual attacks. This suggests that China's air defense network might not be as formidable as advertised when confronting advanced US aircraft. In reality, if the US were to launch an attack on China, its targets would not be limited to Beijing. Missile bases, command and communication centers, critical radar installations, space launch and monitoring centers, important airports, military research centers, and major factories across China could all be on the US military hit list. Additionally, logistical support facilities such as military transport hubs, ammunition depots, and oil depots would also be targeted. The Chinese Air Force has stationed J-16 and J-11 fighters in Weifang, Shandong, and Dalian respectively. However, these aircraft would likely struggle against the US F-22 and F-35. Even the J-20, touted as China's premier fighter jet, has only about 20 to 30 units of service, comparable to the number of F-35s in the South Korean Air Force. Its combat effectiveness is questionable, especially considering the short lifespan of its new engines, which significantly limits the operational capabilities of these J-20s. Beijing is only 200 kilometers from the Bohai Bay, and the US fighter jets can cruise at speeds exceeding 1,000 kilometers per hour, meaning they could reach Beijing from South Korea in under an hour. The 1,400-kilometer distance between Kyushu, Japan, and Beijing is also within operational range of the F-35A. Thus, an attack on Beijing by F-35s is highly plausible. Apart from fighter jets, the US also boasts a formidable bomber fleet, with the B-2 and the upcoming B-21 stealth bombers being particularly noteworthy. These ghost-like strategic weapons would play a crucial role in an airstrike against China. The B-2 bomber is the US Air Force's exclusive ace. Enemy radars find it extremely difficult to detect, and even when it occasionally appears, it vanishes so quickly that fire control systems barely have time to lock on, let alone shoot it down. This massive bomber can carry up to 20 tons of munitions, including nuclear bombs, conventional bombs, and specialized bunker busters like the GBU-57AB. A combination of a million-ton class B-61 tactical nuclear bomb and a giant bunker buster could destroy command centers buried 200 meters underground, paralyzing the Chinese military's command system. And the B-21 bomber is a pinnacle of cutting-edge technology, considered the ultimate evolution of stealth bombers. It can render ground radars and air defense missile systems practically useless. With the B-21, the US military can strike any target without being constrained by air defense firepower. The B-21 also boasts formidable electronic warfare capabilities, effortlessly penetrating enemy command and control systems, causing enemy aircraft computers to blue screen, and disrupting missile guidance with electromagnetic interference. Rumor has it that the B-21 incorporates revolutionary anti-gravity flight technologies, enabling maneuvers comparable to the sci-fi UFO, such as sharp turns and vertical takeoffs and landings, which would leave enemy pilots in awe. Moreover, the nuclear bombs and bunker busters carried by the B-21 are immensely destructive and intimidating. A single bunker buster nuclear bomb could obliterate military bunkers hundreds of meters underground. Imagine the spectacle of dozens in action, a black swarm darkening the sky, leaving a trail of fire and destruction, striking fear into the hearts of enemy forces. In addition to these advanced stealth bombers, the U.S. military can deploy more conventional forces for airstrikes on China, for instance, targeting coastal military installations in Qingdao, Dalian, Zhoushan, and Sanya, as well as densely populated cities like Shanghai and Guangzhou. The U.S. might deploy heavy bombers like the B-1B and B-32 to conduct precision strikes with long-range guided missiles such as the AGM-138. The F-35, as a new-generation multi-role fighter, can also collaborate with bombers in ground attack missions, leveraging its advanced information sensing and processing capabilities. Moreover, Aegis-equipped ships and attack submarines in the Western Pacific can launch numerous Tomahawk cruise missiles to conduct saturation attacks on China's coastal air defense systems, effectively weakening their ability to intercept incoming bombers and clearing the way for subsequent large-scale airstrikes. Faced with such a complex attack system, China's military forces would likely struggle to mount an effective defense. Notably, the maximum range of the Tomahawk cruise missile has increased from 1,600 kilometers to 2,400 kilometers. The hypersonic ground-based missile Dark Shadow has even been deployed to Japan, extending the U.S.'s conventional strike capabilities deep into China. The Japanese self-defense forces have already ordered 400 Tomahawk missiles, underscoring their resolve to counter China's military threat. In the space domain, the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation and its subsidiaries, located in Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an, and Sichuan, are responsible for developing and manufacturing manned spacecraft, satellites, rockets, and missiles. However, if these facilities were to be precisely targeted by the U.S. military, China would lose its capability to produce subsequent spacecraft, severely impacting its missile arsenal. Furthermore, China's space launch centers and monitoring stations might also be targeted, crippling their ability to launch new satellites and manage those already in orbit. It is evident that the U.S. military has the capability to paralyze China's core military capabilities in a short period. Not only could critical military infrastructure be destroyed, but the Chinese military's information network could be severed, and the political and military leadership could be decapitated, leading to a halt in defense production capabilities. Currently, the U.S. has multiple carrier strike groups, such as the Reagan and Roosevelt, deployed in the Western Pacific, with Ohio-class missile submarines ready to launch 144 Tomahawk cruise missiles at any moment. With the deployment of the B-21 stealth bomber, the U.S. will have even more advanced stealth platforms, significantly enhancing its deterrence capability against China. This growing military disparity is a key factor underpinning Trump's strong rhetoric towards China. Unlike the Biden administration's approach of economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure to contain China, Trump believes that dealing with a tough leader like Xi Jinping requires a direct threat to his personal power and safety. Only by making Xi feel that his power base is destabilized and the political situation in China is spiraling out of control would he be willing to come to the negotiating table and make significant concessions. During his first term as president, Trump explicitly directed the Pentagon to consider collisions between Chinese and U.S. naval vessels as an act of war and to respond militarily. This firm stance deterred China from further such incidents at sea. In April 2017, Trump demonstrated his decisiveness during his villa diplomacy. While dining with Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago, Trump abruptly left the dinner to inform Xi that he had ordered a strike of 60 missiles on Syria in response to the Syrian government's use of chemical weapons. In August 2020, Taiwanese media reported that the Trump administration was considering bombing China's illegally occupied Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. Although this plan was ultimately not executed due to a lack of cooperation from the Philippines, it underscored the administration's tough stance on the South China Sea issue. Objectively speaking, the Obama administration took some balancing actions against China's behavior in the South China Sea during its final term, such as sending warships and bombers into disputed areas for freedom of navigation operations. However, these actions were more symbolic compared to the potential military strikes considered by the Trump administration, notably in recent years, as China's handling of issues such as the pandemic, economy, and livelihood has sparked controversy. An increasing number of Chinese citizens have questioned their government's competency and developed a more favorable view of the U.S. Therefore, Trump's assertive stance against the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has garnered support from some Chinese citizens. In 2023, the U.S. further strengthened its position on Taiwan, following 4 public statements by President Biden expressing willingness to intervene militarily in a Taiwan Strait conflict. The U.S. military dispatched several small teams to conduct targeted training and exercises on islands near Taiwan during the April U.S.-Philippines joint military exercises. This was widely seen as preparation for a potential Taiwan Strait conflict. Simultaneously, there were frequent interactions between the U.S. Congress and Taiwan, with multiple bipartisan delegations visiting Taiwan and meeting with high-level officials, sending a clear signal of strengthened U.S.-Taiwan cooperation and commitment to maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. In response to these U.S. actions, China expressed anger and frustration, attempting to invoke UN Resolution 2758 to legitimize its One China principle. However, on May 28, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller clarified that the resolution only affirmed the People's Republic of China's representation in the UN and did not address the issue of Taiwan's sovereignty. On May 16, U.S. Senators Jim Risch and Jeanne Shaheen introduced a resolution reaffirming that the U.S.'s One China policy is not equivalent to the CCP's One China principle and opposing the CCP's efforts to block Taiwan's participation in international organizations. In July of the previous year, the U.S. House of Representatives unanimously passed the Taiwan International Solidarity Act to help Taiwan resist diplomatic isolation from the CCP. This act also clarified the relevant content of Resolution 2758. In the face of increasing U.S. pressure, Beijing seems to be experiencing an unprecedented sense of crisis. Despite Xi Jinping's meetings with Vladimir Putin in Beijing, where they signed a joint statement of non-allied partnership and repeatedly condemned U.S. interference in China's internal affairs, China has also been contemplating some conciliatory gestures in private. For instance, they decided to gift 2 giant pandas to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. by the end of the year to continue the tradition of panda diplomacy between the two nations. The Chinese ambassador to the U.S. even publicly called for the same level of care for U.S.-China relations as for the panda's future. However, this move sparked widespread controversy within China. Many Chinese criticized the decision as a sign of weakness and a lack of dignity in front of the U.S. Public opinion in China is largely unsupportive of this gesture. Numerous netizens voiced their concerns in the comments section of the U.S. Embassy in China, fearing that the pandas would be mistreated and accusing authorities of incompetence. Some even directly criticized Beijing, viewing this as an act of capitulation to the U.S. In stark contrast to public sentiment, the Chinese diplomatic apparatus is working diligently to stabilize U.S.-China relations. Following the panda diplomacy gesture, China's vice foreign minister made an urgent visit to the U.S. starting on May 30th to meet with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell in hopes of maintaining communication and preventing the situation from spiraling out of control. However, given the deep-seated differences between the two countries on issues such as Taiwan, trade, and human rights, as well as the overall U.S. strategic competition against China, it remains uncertain whether China's conciliatory efforts will be effective. As some analysts have pointed out, no matter how adorable the pandas are, they cannot obscure the structural conflicts between the U.S. and China. To genuinely improve relations with the U.S., China will likely need to show more substantial commitment and sincerity.